Dr. Wiedenfeld here to talk more about Hollywood from 1945 to 1960. So, in the first part of this lecture, I talked about the main themes: international dominance and the decline of the studio system. We got a couple reasons why. There's the nation's military dominance after World War II, which continues through the Cold War and the rivalry. We had All That Heaven Allows was a great example of the move to the suburbs, television, and event cinema. Drawing people to see movies like Ten Commandments, which is also a good example of American power internationally, by the way, and its support of Israel. So, the Paramount decision, though, forced the studios to sell off their theaters. So, what did that mean? Well, they could no longer make sort of mid-level movies and just be sure and force all of the theaters out there to show them. Their on one effect was to concentrate towards bigger budget movies, blockbusters. So Ten Commandments, that's a traditional subject. The Western, on the other hand, was traditionally a cheap B-movie genre. Just for boys and men. But during this era, they start to make what's called the super Western, which are these big budget Westerns that have more complex characters and plots in them. John Ford really kind of pioneered the more mature Western with Stagecoach in 1939. Made a series of Westerns here. The Searchers is the most famous from this era. It's a story about John Wayne, again, as his frequent star, is trying to rescue a girl through a relation who had been abducted by American Indians or Native Americans in a raid. So, the Indians have taken her. We need to go get her back. Hence on the poster you see, had to find her, had to find her, had to find her. Now, another thing on the poster, and it's set in Monument Valley, it's set in Texas, but it's filmed in Monument Valley, same as Stagecoach. You see the beautiful landscape there. And the sense of the widescreen. VistaVision, you'll see on there, Technicolor. These are all the event pictures of the day. Now, another thing you'll notice that's interesting here, look at who the company that's presenting this. Warner Brothers present the C.H. Whitney picture starring. Now, why doesn't Warner Brothers just present it? Who's this C.H. Whitney fellow? Well, what's going on here is that the productions start to be more semi-independent productions. Rather, if you're the movie theater, if you're the studio, you're really a distributor. You're not sure that you don't know what you want to invest, whether the now independent movie theaters out there are going to buy it. So one way to mitigate that risk is that you let independent producers risk their money on a picture, and if you think it's good, you might just invest partly in it. Then you distribute it for them. They'll get more of the profits, but they should take more of the risk. The other big change that happens with this is how the star system works, how the star contracts work. It used to be in the 1930 to 45, stars were just under contract for a company. They worked for it the same. Anybody works for an organization. They're just for 7 years. They are an employee, and they're going to do so many pictures at this studio. And they would have a whole troops of actors that would work at the same studio, so it would be easy to churn out, more mid-level movies because you had writers and good actors who worked together all the time, and just every week day after day, every week they'd come in and shoot the next movie. Now you start to do one-off productions, and so here there's this C.V. Whitney is going to be the main investor. interesting story behind him, but not so interesting to get into. And John Ford, the package is that okay, Whitney is going to put money behind a script that John Ford, he's a famous director now, is going to work on with John Wayne, who's famous. This is the package, and you see they have the other stars on there who are just one off for this picture are going to work with them. So this kind of package unit approach is what it's called. It's sort of semi-independent. Things are made one-off more frequently now than the old studio system. So this is maybe why there's a lot of artistic quality during this period if there's an economic decline, because they're not making as many movies. So speaking of the artistic quality, here's a still from the film that speaks to its complexity. So in general, Hollywood wants to avoid controversial issues. After Birth of a Nation in 1915, they start to get banned in a lot of cities, and they say, "Oh, we don't want to risk getting banned places, so we're just going to avoid controversy, middle road." And you see that with the Ten Commandments. I talked about previously how basically an all-white cast are not going to bring the race theme into it. Well, here that's not true everywhere. Here they do, because this is a conflict between the American Indians and the European Americans or white men, and so Natalie Wood, small part. She becomes famous actress though. Plays the young girl who's abducted. And the hero, John Wayne, in days of old, the Indians are just bad. In Stagecoach, the Indians are just bad. You can't trust them. In 56, now there's a sense that now John Wayne, this heroic, European American man, might be a bit of a bad guy. I'm not going to go so far as to say that it's taking a indigenous perspective and really seeing him as a colonizer, but the bad side here is present, and we're supposed to be aware of it. And in this way, the movie is raising questions about race relations and the kind of racial caste system that had been normalized before this in American life. Let me move on to Vertigo. Also a great example of package unit, maybe even a better example, because Alfred Hitchcock is the most prominent director in the day. He's with Lew Wasserman helps get him special deals and he makes so much money that he can make films on his own, and he's seen as a big artist. So part of the package unit is seeing the director not as just an employee doing whatever the studio bosses tell him to do, but an artist who has a little more liberty to make films. Some of the touchstones for Hitchcock films are that they take place in these iconic settings, usually American settings. Here, the Golden Gate Bridge. You also notice it's also in color and widescreen. There's a complexity here in the movie's reflection on the role of the viewer in stories and how those work together, that Laura Mulvey famously talks about in a 1975 article. So here's a couple stills of the hero Jimmy Stewart, who plays a private investigator. He's out at a restaurant and he's investigating this for his friend, who's the man sitting there with the bow tie on the right. He's following, his wife, who tells him his wife is cheating, thinks his wife something is going on with her, doesn't know if she's cheating on him or what. It's just something weird's going on, so he's supposed to tail her. Played by Kim Novak, and all this sense of the identity of the actor comes into play, skepticism over what you see, and an interesting relationship to painting as well. this is a very, you don't see this kind of profile shots very often. And she turns around and we get the profile in the other direction. This is like a coin, like a medallion. There's other paintings that figure in the story, and it's extremely self-conscious and complicated, and this sense of not believing what you see without giving away the whole movie. That's all I'll say about Vertigo. Okay. I think ranked by, Sight and Sound ranked it as a #1 film of all time, in like 2015 or something. Well, anyway, on to another picture. On the Waterfront. Boxing story about a boxer. Boxing story. Mob wants a boxer to throw a fight. Now, this is a very common plot line at the time. Boxing was really associated with the mob and gangsters all the way back to the 30s. Boxing actually became extremely popular on television. Probably one of the biggest draws on television would be live boxing during the 50s. We don't focus on what's happening in the ring here, but off it. And Marlon Brando, Elia Kazan are worth mentioning because of their relationship to the Actors Studio, which was founded in New York. And, Elia Kazan, I think, had studied with Stanislavski in Moscow. So this is kind of method acting, the idea that authentic expression comes from the actor, connecting with their own inner life with the character that they're playing, and improvising and drawing upon that. And Brando is great at that in this movie, and he's there on the right. And he was also, just a major star at the time. The other thing about this movie, and Kazan in particular, was, I mentioned that he was in Moscow. Well, big theme that happened during the Cold War was anti-communism. Their politicians are going after the communists, and in 1947 they said that Hollywood is overrun with communists. We have to get them out of there, and they hold these congressional hearings called that are known as HUAC, the House Committee on Un-American Activities. First hearings were in 1947, and there were 10 screenwriters who in the 30s had been in the Communist Party, which was totally legal. And back in the 30s, we were allies with the Soviets, lots of people joining the Communist Party. Well, now by the late 40s in the Cold War, this is a major problem. And these Hollywood 10 screenwriters get blacklisted. Their careers just get ruined because they had been in the Communist Party back in the 30s, and they refused to kind of cooperate and name names. Now, Kazan is one who did name names. He goes and in front of this committee and tells about a bunch of other people and confirms that they were communists or not, and basically ruins their career by naming their names. Like, oh, so-and-so was an actor or screenwriter who was active in the party and at the time, and that gave testimony that then would lead the companies to say, studios to say, okay, well, we just won't employ them. Ronald Reagan, by the way, president of the Screen Actors Guild, huge anti-communist at the time. Another guy who's testifying with him. So this movie is interesting to read in this way because it comes about a couple of years. It's 1954, so it's not long after Kazan had testified, and the kind of moral struggle that Brando's character is going through about whether I should throw the fight or and give up my career. This kind of conflict is similar to and can be read as what was going on with Kazan. Now, a lot of people didn't appreciate his naming names because it's a carnival court that's just politicians on a kind of witch hunt is how a lot of people saw it. And so they didn't buy Kazan's argument that there was some sort of moral integrity in playing a part in testifying in front of this witch hunt. it's a bunch of baloney, and he ruined these people's careers. So this is the kind of thought that went behind why some people wouldn't work with Kazan. And then when he got a Lifetime Achievement Award in, I think, the 2000s, some people wouldn't applaud him. Didn't stand up for that reason, because he had ruined careers for. Some people say it was a great cause. Other people know that it was just a witch hunt of politicians. So this movie is interesting for that reason, and for talking about anti-communism in the period generally. Now, the last one I want to talk about is Rebel Without a Cause, starring James Dean, the bad boy from a good family. Here again, you have an example of suburban life, but what's special about this movie is, or what it represents in terms of the trends and developments in general, is a focus on a target audience, teenagers. So at this time, as we're moving away from the big downtown theater that the whole family is going to together, now how do we draw people out? There's the event picture, like Ten Commandments, that still can draw everybody together, or you can try and go after specific audiences. Teenagers are the best because they're the ones who are going out all the time. Adults, who have kids and jobs, they're not going to the movies all that often. Kids will, though. So you start to see what's known as exploitation pictures during this time, which are the exploitation pictures are cheap ones. This is not an exploitation picture. This is a premiere one. But the subject is an example of the kind, the subject that's focused on teenagers is the same sort of strategy that exploitation pictures are making. See, CinemaScope, that's another widescreen, the most popular widescreen format, actually. Natalie Wood stars in this as well. You see her there. The cars, it's a suburban setting. James Dean, who in fact died in a car wreck right before this movie came out, it's a very wild historical background to it. In the movie, is in a car race right here that's quite dangerous and doesn't end so well for his opponent. And here they are about to race, and he's very confident. The thing about Dean, not only is he a very good-looking man, but he was also an actor trained at the Actors Studio under Lee Strasberg here in New York. And, so a young, promising method actor who, then met his end too soon. The other thing I want to talk about the cars is just another business thing, that drive-in movies became a full 25% of movie theaters by the end of the 50s. So a lot of small theaters closed, a lot of drive-in theaters opened. You can imagine that it fit with a suburban audience where people are moving out there. Somewhat cheap if you're an operator, all you have to do is buy a field on the edge of town, put up a screen, and then build a little refreshment stand there that also has your projector equipment in it. The sound sucked. That's a different story. But people, it was inexpensive all the way around for people to go to the drive-in. And you saw a lot of exploitation genres here. Rock and roll movies, science fiction movies, horror movies. These are the kind of staple teenage genre movies that would especially play at the drive-in. Okay, so that's only 6 of many great films at the time. Hard not to talk about Singing in the Rain in particular, but as a musical, one of the best musicals of all time. I could go on forever though. So, main theme, international dominance of Hollywood. It does very well selling its films abroad. The studio system declines though, and we talked about most of the reasons here. There's a decline because of the Paramount decision. They have to sell off the theaters, and it's now competing with television, and so they're making fewer pictures. They're high quality, and there's a lot of experimentation going on with the exploitation genres. Roger Corman at American International Pictures is a good example of these kind of smaller independents who are trying new things to get people to come to the movies. We talked about widescreen, color. I didn't talk about fads like 3D, but those are also out there. That's Hollywood from 1945 to 1960.